Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back at it again with another Wuthering Waves video. And this time, it's going to be focused on something that we talk about a lot on this channel, the meta, teams, unit pull value, tier list, so on and so forth. And the creator that has made this video, this is actually their first video ever. But don't worry, this isn't their first time getting acquainted with the Wuthering Waves meta, because Sweat over here is actually one of the individuals who contributes to this Pridewin tier list. And so I would dare say that I agree with like 95% of what's actually on this list. There are a couple things here and there where I'm like, maybe we could, tone it back a little bit. But overall, I think his takes are pretty solid. We haven't had a video like this one in quite a while. I don't think that there's a lot of people that dive like super deep into the meta very often. So let's go ahead and see what this one is all about, because, well, let's be honest. A lot of stuff in WuWa's changing, and a lot of it is coming as a result of version 3.0.
Hi! This video is long overdue. Wuthering Waves is a gacha game made by Kuro Games, officially released in May 2024, where the main thing that you do is you grab the anime girl, and you slap the enemy in the face as hard as you can.
That's pretty accurate. Yeah, I would dare say this is pretty accurate, though some people, they don't actually use an anime girl, they use an anime guy.
So anyway.
Wait, how long did that take? I see why this is his first video ever, and I see why it took so long to make.
So anyway, we're now in January 2026, and a year and a half later, it won the Player's Voice Award on the Game Awards. Wait, what? And version 3.0 of the game dropped, alongside its two new characters, Linne and Monye, who, by the way, look absolutely gorgeous. Like, look at them.
They're alright.
It's not just them, however. The map and the overall gameplay have been a beautiful experience for many players, for veterans, returning, and new players alike.
I personally like the 2.x characters better. Yo, you might just be a hater, right? Or you could just be right like me. I think the 2.x designs are better overall.
Consistently amassing multiple $1 million a month in earnings for just mobile revenue alone, that is a lot of money, Wuthering Waves has managed to accumulate a massive active player base, and is particularly known by the fans for its complex combat mechanics with a lot of intricacies, not only in how to handle each enemy encounter the player may face, but also in how the game's overall meta works.
I think that's pretty clear cut as well. When people are like known as like Wuthering Waves players, or Wuthering Waves is one of the reasons why they play a game, one of the biggest reasons cited is oftentimes the combat. And I actually think back to like Wuthering Waves version 2.4, right? And I think also version 3.1, where we're going to have a massive influx of new players. Guys, there's a good chance, and there's also just the realistic opportunity, right? For people to just be like, hey, I am not really the biggest fan of combat like this. It might be a little bit too hard. It might be a little bit too fast-paced, or it might just be too complex. Because I think that there are a lot of individuals that come from like a Genshin Impact, a Honkai Star Rail, right? And they go over to Wuthering Waves, and they're just like, oh shit. They get like a bit overwhelmed with how to actually play the game. So, yeah, I think he's right on the money over here.
That being said, I'm fittingly named Sweat, I do the funny math on the funny anime gambling game, and today I'm gonna teach you how to best use your anime girls in combat.
So you can also think about it this way. For people that have a bit of a skill issue, for people that might fall into that casual Genshin HSR crowd, and you're interested in learning how to not want to quit the game within, a couple weeks of starting it, then this is the perfect video, I guess.
So today's video will follow the plan. We'll first feature a pretty simple explanation of the game's combat and gacha mechanics, then what makes characters synergize together and what a return on investment is, because that's pretty confusing. We'll then analyze each endgame mode the game provides and what kinds of characters would perform in those modes. Then finally, I'll be giving my opinion on the current state of the meta and give you all a little tier list of the best characters to use overall.
So do keep in mind that there will be another tier list in this video towards the end. It is going to be, I don't think the actual Pridewin one, but like his own like personal one. So do keep that in mind. I've been told to give a disclaimer here.
Now feel free to skip forward to any points you're already very familiar with. Like for example, veterans may skip the first chapter if they like, since I'm gonna cover the basics everyone learns by just playing the game. That being said, let's get started with chapter 1.
Okay, so there might be some people out there that want us to skip forward. But we need to see every single building block when it comes to this conversation, because once you guys see the tier list at the end, you'll want that additional explanation.
Wuthering Waves is a live-action, 3D, open-world combat game inspired by games such as Genshin Impact and Zelda Breath of the Wild, for example. Its meta revolves around teams of 3 characters, with kits that have a total of 7 skills and 2 passives.
I would dare say, he might ruffle a couple of feathers by only mentioning those 2 games. I think it probably makes a lot of sense to also weave in a bit of, you know, like more action RPG-oriented combat, a bit of like Devil May Cry or something. Just because, you know, WuWa does get a little bit more fast-paced than those other titles.
A lot of skills, each capable of containing multiple effects according to the current character status and the input of the player, because, I mean, it wasn't hard enough to begin with, so the way characters can interact with each other and with the enemy can get pretty complex. Several ways to increase their strength exist, such as pulling the gacha for extra character copies and or weapons, so in other words, spending all your life savings on a video game, and using the farmable gearing systems, those being increasing character and weapon level, skill level, and echoes. So in
if you ever have a method for progressing your account, this is always going to be my suggestion, ladies and gentlemen. Don't ever pull sequence nodes for units. If you plan on spending, if you want to be somebody that, like, you know, wants things to pull, just try to pull every single unit S0R1. I think that is genuinely the best way for you to, like, maximize your fun in this game and actually make sure that you're, you know, kind of like working within the confines of like how this game's meta works. Because I think a lot of people don't necessarily recognize that the more sequence nodes you buy, that's basically like taking one layer of the game and like unraveling it. There are literally sequence nodes where they read, skip this part of the character's kit, rotate faster. That's like Rosia's S1, where like literally she deletes a move from her rotation. Is that really something that's, like, adding a lot to the game? Sure, it's making you, like, clear faster and stuff. But it's actually, in a lot of ways, like, taking away from the amount that you're actually playing.
In other words, spending your life on a video game instead. Every resource takes a while to farm, whether it be for pulling on the gacha, which also means relying on luck-based drops, or simply gearing characters properly. Each investment is costly, due to most resources being time-gated by the game's stamina system called wave plates, and hence, not all characters will be able to be utilized in combat on every account to their maximum efficiency.
That's the nature of a gacha. You gotta know exactly where you want to spend your resources. You gotta know who you're prioritizing first so that you dedicate all your resources to that person. If the goal is to be meta, is to clear the endgame, is to clear the content, right? And remember, that's what this entire video is all about. Because I think I just want to get this conversation started and ended before it gets to like a more annoying point. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna get a little bit sweaty over here. You can probably guess from the creator's name. The conversation and the tips provided are gonna get very sweaty. And so if I see one of you nerds in the comment section who's just gonna say shit like, oh, well, all you need to do is pull only the waifus that you like and you'll still be able to do everything you need to, bucko. Don't worry, even if you can't clear TOA's floor 3 and 4, you're only losing like 50 asteroid a month. That's not the point. The point is to beat the game. And if you don't beat every level, you don't beat the game. It's not even about the asteroid at this point. It's about beating the game.
In fact, reaching theoretical perfection due to how random the ecosystem is, which is offering...
Like, you ever gotten a high score? You ever seen somebody getting a high score in Pac-Man? Or like the arcade games? What do people get for getting the high score at the arcade games? Nothing. But they still want to achieve it. It's kind of the same thing for people that are trying to clear the end game in these games.
Random stat distributions with randomly increasing values is for all intents and purposes impossible because 99.9% of gamblers quit right before they win big. As a result, the game's meta revolves around your mom. The game's meta revolves around investing in
I'm gonna make that strike number 1.
Characters that have the ability to perform as well as possible on the team against the widest variety of enemies possible and against the most battle scenarios possible, while ideally inducing the lowest cost possible.
Okay, so to sum that up, his take on the game's meta is getting the most affordable team possible to clear the hardest content possible. So basically, using the least that you can to clear the most possible, which I think is fair.
Challenge players in their account strength, a few high difficulty endgame modes exist, being Double Pawns Matrix, which offers the highest difficulty content against single boss targets, Whimpering Wastes, which focuses on AoE and multi-wave combat, and finally, Tower of Adversity, which offers a mix of both, but at a lower difficulty than both game modes, that target one specific aspect.
So he's entirely spreading misinformation over here. That's why he actually put in this editor's note. So if you're not currently aware at the time of filming, Kuro Games completely fucked up the Tower of Adversity, and it is now the most imbalanced one we've ever had in the history of the game. I have never seen a floor in an endgame go from feeling balanced to severely overtuned from like one bug fix. And the thing is that I have never also seen the community so unilaterally agreed upon the idea that it is unbalanced. I don't think I've seen a single person say that it looks good. Not a, like, single person. So that's kind of at least, like, that's at least the good part of the situation.
Specific aspect. So you have the two extremes and the in-between. Players are expected to have a minimum of 4 fully functional teams of 3 characters that are geared up to endgame level, with at least 2 of these being competent in AoE, and all 4 being competent in single target at once, in order to maximize the rewards granted by each game mode.
So, to play that back, and I think you should have used some visuals for this one, so we'll use this as an opportunity to give some feedback as well, because, yeah, you got to have been paying attention over there. The goal in Wuthering Waves, if your object, right, is to get all the endgame rewards and get them every single reset, is to have specifically 4 teams. Hopefully, all 4 of those teams are going to have different attributes. Maybe not, but 4 teams, and then 2 of them are relatively AoE capable, but you'd want all 4 of them to be AoE capable. And the idea is that that should be enough for you to clear TOA, doubled pawns, as well as Whimpering Wastes pretty consistently. But as you can see, 4 teams can be up to 12 characters. And while Verena and Shorekeeper can be used like twice so they don't really matter, it's more like having 10 units. That is probably something that makes a bit more sense. Around 10 total units to clear everything reliably.
So it's pretty difficult to achieve and it takes a lot of time. Hence, the Wuthering Waves meta revolves around investing into proper teams to clear these contents as smoothly as possible.
And you want to know what's really nice? Having sub-DPS units that are able to be used on multiple teams. Because think about the number of characters that I just talked about, right? 10. If you now have a sub-DPS that's able to work on multiple teams, then now you need 9 or 8. That's what makes some characters so much more valuable than others. For example, Chu Yan is a valuable unit if you have Frolova and Galbrena, because now this guy suddenly turns into a best-in-slot sub-DPS for 2 DPS units, and they're both different attributes. So by having Galbrena, Frolova, and Chu Yan, you've got 3 units but 2 teams. Then you put in the Shorekeeper, that's 4 units and 2 teams, because you could run Shorekeeper, Chu Yan, Frolova, and of course, Shorekeeper, Chu Yan, Galbrena as well. Similar ideas for Yuno over here, because there are so many heavy attackers in the game, right? You got Augusta, you got Gian, you got Frolova too, or not really Frolova, but you also got Galbrena as well. That's kind of like where that value comes from. That's where, and one of the reasons why, right? Lene is so high on this tier list over here because she's able to be used with a bunch of different units, right? You can use Lene with a Galbrena if you wanted to. You can use Lene with the Frolova if you wanted to, and they probably will still clear. And so that's one of the big reasons for why Lene pushed everybody down on the Prywin tier list. It's based off of that flexibility. When you think about it from the perspective of needing the 4 teams and thinking about it in terms of number of limited characters you need to pull, well, if you pull Lene, then now she's a sub DPS that might be able to be used on all 4 of those teams you might need for the endgame. And so now that number of required characters gets lower and lower and lower, depending on who you pull. Let me juxtapose that with an example of who you shouldn't pull. This piece of shit. Yeah, this piece of dog shit over here. Because she only works on 1 team. And that team already has a free-to-play option that's like 95% of her effectiveness. Remember, you need 10 or so units to clear the endgame. Maybe 9. This unit, when you spend pulls on her, doesn't change that number. She does nothing. It's the same level that it was before.
And what actually constitutes a proper team.
Now, this is going to be a good discussion to have, because this is going to let you guys figure out, hey, if I have one unit, who should I pull next?
In Wuthering Waves, teams are always composed of 3 characters that can have various interactions with each other that may create synergies. All enemies and characters have elemental types, and if your character's element matches the enemy, you deal significantly less damage to them, so not all teams can work against every enemy, meaning some characters that have higher raw damage output can be outclassed by lower teams with a better suited element for the situation. This means there isn't a single team that's truly above the others, though in neutral contexts where no elements are favored, that can theoretically exist.
So, this is just an example of where that phenomenon occurs. This is the strongest DPS in the game. Right? Kartithia is the strongest DPS in the game. She has the best team, and that does the highest damage per rotation. This team is entirely, though, Arrow, other than, like, Chisa, but you get what I'm talking about. That team is completely unplayable into any Arrow enemy, and that's just how it is, right? And so, whenever there is a TOA or a WuWa, or God forbid, doubled pawns with Arrow-resistant enemies, it's like, okay, well, it's not really the time to use this best team in the game, but that's where having multi-element teams comes in handy, because hey, it might be that like your sub DPS, right, is resistant to the boss, but your main DPS is Havoc, and so even if Chu Yan, you know, is getting his damage reduced, Galbraith and Frolova aren't, and the team still works. So those are just like some of like the differentiations over there. That's why it's sometimes better to be split, but also sometimes better to be mono.
A good example of a usual team core would be featuring a main.
What are those swap keybinds? Yeah, wait, let me just take a look at this for a second. Caps lock and left. Okay, this guy's a fucking weirdo.
Of a usual team core would be featuring a main DPS, a sub DPS / buffer character, and a support, who always features body white buffing, and in the most common cases also has some form of sustain, whether that be healing or shielding. This is often referred to as a hypercarry team.
So yeah, hypercarry is going to be slot 1. Support with the outro, the sub DPS with the outro, and the DPS that takes all 2 outros and then goes fuck shit up. Makes sense to me.
Using some of the characters present in this current patch, an example of such a team would be a Yuno Linne Shorekeeper team. Yuno acts as the main DPS, so she's the enemy girl doing the slapping. Linne is buffing Yuno to the max so that she can actually slap enemies as hard as she can. And finally, Shorekeeper is buffing both of them at once, while providing extra heals for added comfort.
You're going to replace Shorekeeper with Mornier in a couple of hours, but yeah.
While healing isn't a necessary component to team building in Wuthering Waves, because you can just dodge everything, in Shorekeeper's case, it allows her to use the rejuvenating level 5-piece set to buff the party's attack team-wide. Additionally, while almost every second slot buffer is only buffing one character at once, and switching that character out ends the majority of their buffs, mostly in the form of outro skills, a proper third slot partner will almost always have party-wide buffing that doesn't expire upon switching between characters.
So, Shorekeeper, Verena, and Mornier are characters whose outro skills stack. And there are not a lot of characters in the game whose outro skills will stack with another one. And those are the types of units that typically actually get way more use on an account. And so, you can think about it this way. The units that I'm talking about over here are going to be, well, there's a reason why she's a must pull. There's a reason why everyone recommends you get her from the beginner banner. Those happen for a reason. Then you also got the good old, well, when Mornier does come out, she's also going to be in this category. Those are units that, regardless of where you are in the game, they're always going to have some level of use, and they're always going to be played in some fashion. And that just makes them, obviously, right? She's been here since her release. She has not moved since her release, Tier 0 Shorekeeper support, and she's probably not going to move. After I've seen Mornier, she's probably not going to move ever, because Kuro actually knows how to balance the fucking game and not make every new support power creep the other ones like, well, other games. You know what I'm talking about.
Which is the reason why most teams fall under this archetype. The goal is pretty simple: buff the main anime girl as hard as you can, slap the enemy in the face as hard as you can. It's a team archetype that works well and is also really easy to conceptualize and understand, which is why most meta teams fall under this archetype.
If you're somebody that's watching this video to get educated, or if you're somebody where you're listening to the things in this video and you're like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's pretty neat. Oh, that's how it works. If that's your internal monologue watching this, don't play anything other than a hypercarry team. Okay? Just don't play other teams other than hypercarry teams, because that's meant to be like the building blocks for 90% of players. That's why 99% of my content is geared around them, because that's how 99% of people play. But some people, they skip the step and they want to get into like the quick swap, the sweaty quick swap gameplay. Watch me click 400 buttons in three seconds. Right? They're like, they go to that and then they kind of actually don't know how the game works, because they jumped to like, guys, this would be like learning how to play guitar, not by reading sheet music, but by memorizing somebody's fingers on YouTube. Like that's what it feels like when somebody just goes right to like the sweaty shit.
However, not all teams have to follow this archetype, despite it being the most common. Some other teams, which I'll unofficially refer to as chain systems for the sake of illustration, will instead have 3 characters all capable of dealing damage on their own, and all capable of buffing each other on their own as well.
I call this team the human centipede, because every person has an outro skill that expires on swap. So you kind of just go outro skill into like outro. It's like a human centipede, but with outro. You guys get what I'm talking about.
There have been several examples of this kind of team showing up recently. With, for example, the Falova Cantarella.
What do you call that?
Rocha and the
What do you call that?
Changli Brand Lupa teams. Wait, is that a guy in my anime girl game? In these scenarios, all...
He also got the arrows wrong, but he mentioned that in a comment. That's not the... It actually goes in the reverse order. It probably took him an hour to draw those arrows too.
3 party members buff each other in some capacity, mostly via their outro skills, and they take turns doing their rotations to have constant damage output on the enemy at all times, because they're all capable of dealing a solid amount of damage.
That's the wrong team order. I just said he reversed the arrows.
Still, that's not all there is to the Wuthering Waves team building. Some other teams don't follow either of those archetypes, and instead use the game's mechanics in a clever way. Several teams have been conceptualized in this logic, where, for example, 2 main DPS characters do their rotation simultaneously, so instead of one enemy girl slapping the enemy's face, it's actually 2, which is pretty revolutionary, I know.
Like I said before, I hope he doesn't go too deep into this.
Oh, and they do this by abusing a technique called swap cancelling, or quick swap, which means you start an attack animation with a character, you switch out, and they finish that animation, while you can input other actions with another character on the field at the same time. That way, you have 2 characters, or even your whole team, casting skills on the enemy all at once for even more damage quicker.
Basically, if you don't know a baseline rotation, there's no point in learning quick swap. You can think about quick swap as you viewing your regular rotation and then realizing, oh, I've got some gaps over here where my character's in an animation, but they're not really doing anything. I can't input any controls. That's when you can swap over to somebody else, input something real fast, then swap back to the original character and finish their attack animation. But to know where you have like lag or like empty space that you can fill in with something else, you have to like know what the rotation is at a baseline. And so if you kind of don't know what you're doing in the first place, how are you supposed to improve on it?
There are even teams with 2 usually second slot partners that we use for team-wide buffing instead, since it's equally, if not more advantageous than using a traditional support. For example, the Linne team can instead use Shakona, and it's in fact ideal to do so, since her weapon and some of her kit buffs apply team-wide and buff even harder.
And has her own healing, so the team still has sustain.
The system of Changli Brand's Lupa can instead use Galbrenna over Changli, so Lupa is getting buffed less, but Galbrenna, having higher damage potential than Changli and being buffed by the 2 of them, can outclass her in some situations. And finally, even the Falova Cantarella Rocha team can instead use Cho Yuen, because he can still leverage Falova's outro buffs even though he doesn't really have an outro buff on his own in that team, but he's still able to provide extra damage to her via a mechanic called Echo Skills, which he specializes in, and Falova can also benefit from.
Okay, so just a bit of feedback, Sweat, for the video. Maybe you can put up gameplay of the fucking team that you're talking about. Just saying.
Overall, Wuthering Waves' team building has some pretty linear and easy to understand concepts, but it can also get very complex very quickly if you're trying to optimize.
Guys, you can always tell me, well, Saint, you're being too much of a stickler about B-roll. Well, at least I'm consistent.
As a result, Kuro Games managed to create a meta that's friendly for both casual and more competitive players alike, where going for high score runs using unique teams can still feel rewarding for veterans, while new players get an experience that's rather simple to grasp and get into. With that,
that's one of the key highlights about Wuthering Waves. There's only so much you can do when it comes to getting sweaty in other titles. For example, getting sweaty in Genshin Impact is just kind of like, it looks dumb. Do you know what I mean? Getting sweaty in Genshin Impact looks dumb. I'm thinking back to like the days where you see somebody like going onto Bennett every 3 seconds to like E and then like funneling the particles to like Zhang Ling, and then like it looks gay. Like you know what I mean? Like just watching sweaty Genshin gameplay to me doesn't like look fun at all. And like when you go to like Wuthering Waves, you've got the baseline rotation. But then you've got the sweatiness, which is quick. Like, the sweatiness of Wuthering Waves can at least look cool. It looks like you're at least, like, doing something. There's, like, stuff going on when you do it. It's just, like, it's great that there's, like, that next level capability for the people that want it. But it's also great that there's, like, a baseline playstyle that will still consistently clear. But it's about how you want to enjoy the game, and it's about how you want to actually, you know, push further, even though it's not necessary. And that's good for a game to have. Opportunities to get sweaty for kind of like no reason.
That being said, all of those teams are being crafted with the purpose of achieving the highest score or the lowest clear time in certain endgame modes.
Yep.
So if we bring this team building logic in that context, what does that result in? Let's find out, shall we? So here, we start getting into the actual nitty-gritty of the meta, the more complex and detailed part of learning the game. That is, applying all of the team building knowledge we have in context.
This guy is Chisa, what a loser.
Buckle up, because this one's pretty long. First, let's tackle the easiest endgame to understand, Double Pawns Matrix. This is a game mode where characters have limited energy, so they can only be used for clears a single time if they're specialized, 2 times if they're generalist support like Shorekeeper, which we mentioned earlier for example. Here, we're hitting a single boss and trying to score a total of 5,000 points, which equals to dealing 5 million damage to the enemy in a maximum of 2 minutes. Now, 5 million in 2 minutes sounds like a lot, and well, that's because it is. Not only is that amount what I dream of having on my bank account, especially in 2 minutes, we have to keep in mind this is an endgame mode after all.
I have been able to get 5k scores on every single DPS in the game, functionally. By that, I mean using my built S0R1 DPS and then using trial units from the endgame. So like Kuro built them for me, and some of them have shit builds. And so I would use 1 DPS, the trial support sometimes, and the trial 4-star sub DPS, and clear with some teams. With their best team, of course. Oh yeah, because Mortefi, Verena, Gian is definitely Gian's best team. Yeah, Mortefi, Verena, Gian is definitely still his best team. Yeah, that was not the one that he had at the launch of the game a year and a half ago. It's the same team from version 1.0. That cleared.
And most commonly agreed to be the hardest one, so high difficulty is expected. It's like actually paying off your mortgage. It takes you like literally 30 years to get there, but it's pretty rewarding when it's all said and done.
The problem with this game mode is the fact that you need the units in the first place to be able to challenge it, because you just need 4 teams as a whole.
Since we're hitting a single boss and
it's just hard to do for anyone that has a new account. But frankly, any endgame where you need more than 1 or 2 teams is going to be a problem for somebody that just started the game. I don't think there's anything you can do beyond that. Unless you're going to give, like, fully built trial characters.
trying to deal a lot of damage to it, raw single target damage output is the only determining factor of what makes a team meta in this game mode. We throw AoE completely out the window and solely focus on how hard the enemy go can stab the enemy in the face. Hence, the highest damage output team in the game is one I haven't mentioned yet, but have been showing you the footage in the background. It's the Cardathea Shakona Chisa team you're looking at right now.
This is the best team in the game. And I'm glad that he's showcasing it here for the single target component for one reason. This team kind of sucks dick in AoE. That's just the reality of it. This team in AoE content performs like very just not well. And it's like a complete 180 compared to its performance in single target content. Think about it this way. Cardathea, right, is tier 0 in single target. But in Whimpering Waste or AoE content, she's one of like not even in like the top 5 DPSs. Even in like maybe in the top 10, but not in the top 5. And that's just, well, I'll call it here. I'll say that's pretty good balancing, at least.
It's capable of scoring the highest simply because it deals the most damage to a single target over time.
Keyword single target.
Since damage output is the sole metric of what makes a team good here, it's pretty easy to understand how the meta is structured. A more complicated game mode, however, would be a mode like Whimpering Wastes. This is the AoE-focused game mode. 2 teams are required in this game mode, but no stamina system exists, so you can just bring whoever you want as long as you have 2 teams, and however many times you want.
I would dare say WuWa, depending on the units you have, is by far the easiest endgame. It is by far, right now, depending on if you've invested in the right characters, legitimately it's a joke. Compared to TOA and double pawns, it is like a joke. Just pull for Lova. Brother, it's like not even pull for Lova. It's like, hey, do you have Gion? Hey, do you have Camellia? Do you have Augusta? You're good. Like, there's so many characters that if you have them, you're just good.
In this mode, players can choose one among a variety of tokens, which provide certain buffs to the team, which can be absolutely
Just watch Kuro add 3.0 enemies. Yeah, they also added Tomb Break to WuWa. And, like, bro, you Tomb Break them on accident.
massive. The strongest ones varying periodically depending on what the latest characters are, because car games needs to buff the recently released teams the hardest, otherwise they just wouldn't sell as much. So after clearing some of the smaller stages, which have a limited number of waves of enemies players need to dispatch in 2 minutes, the final stage, which is the most difficult and interesting one, has an endless wave of small to medium-sized enemies spawning in, which give you a certain amount of score upon defeating, and rewards are granted to you based on score. You need a minimum of 4,500 points, it's 2,250 points per team on average to max out the rewards.
I'm gonna be real. I think you went a little bit too in-depth on the specifics over here. It's just kill as much shit as fast as possible.
That being said, since the game mode is AoE-centric, but also relies on multiple waves of enemies with lower HP rather than a boss spawning in constantly, having damage output over extended periods of time is especially favored. Remember the chain system teams I was talking about earlier in the video? Yes.
Why are you putting tiny URLs in my chat? Where is my fucking mods? Why would you post something that hides what the real link is? In a Twitch chat. Are you brain damaged? I'm just timing you out for a fucking day for that. You decided to post a tiny URL link without saying what it was in a Twitch stream. Like, I feel like that's pretty similar to yelling bomb at an airport. It's like the Twitch equivalent of that. Okay, good. Okay, we got past that. Okay, I'm still saying, like, what the how retarded can you be?
So those have constant damage output, and they're really strong there.
Like, bro, that guy, I think that guy's like 10 years old. What the fuck?
Like, in fact, the Falova
Because you gotta be like 10 to be that retarded.
team in specific is literally the strongest team in the mode, and it's not even close. Why? Because she and her team have constant damage output on and off field, thanks to her damage being split half and half, roughly, between herself and Hecate. And
Okay, he's talking about why Frolova's fucking broken. Frolova's kind of just one of those units where she's kind of like the opposite of Cartithia. Is this a YouTube video? Yeah, it is, Techie. Yeah, she's like the opposite of Cartithia, where she's broken as fuck in Whimpering Waste, and she's just like all right in the TOA. She'll get the job done, but she won't get you like these ball-busting, ridiculous results like Cartithia would. But yeah, hope you're doing well, buddy. When's the fucking return stream?
Echo that she summons to fight the enemies as she is off-field. Also having the best crowd control capabilities in the game and very high damage output, she is quite literally the definition of broken in this game mode.
Yep, that would be my #1 picks for people. If you want to have a team where you put in no effort and clear in TOA, pick the Cartithia team. If you want a team where you have no effort and you want to clear in WuWa, choose the woman behind me.
On any Whimpering Waste tier list that's well researched, for example, let's self-glaze and pick Pridwin because I work there and I'm totally not biased, she's so far ahead that she's the only top tier unit. She centralizes the meta like she's Meta Knight from Super Smash Bros. Brawl, it's to that extent. Other teams that perform well in the mode are teams that have multiple high damaging characters present on the team at once, such as a team with Augusta and Yuno who both deal high damage.
Yuno is the worst Whimpering Waste DPS in the game though. Yeah. Do keep that in mind if you're a Yuno main DPS enjoyer or a Yuno main DPS puller. She is not a unit in Whimpering Waste. Please recognize this. You will struggle so much trying to get her to hit more than one target. It's unbelievable.
A lot of quick swap teams are also very strong, like for example, if the Cartithia team is played to the max in quick swap, and of course the chain systems I mentioned earlier, like Jangly Brent Looper, are very good. Like I already glazed the ever-living hell out of Falova, but Monofusion is quite performant as well there. Finally, some teams fully lean into the tokens that the game mode provides permanently, and they exploit them to their fullest.
I don't ever cover these gimmick teams, because this requires you to run like 3 electro sets on all 3 healers. So you would need to have 3 Void Thunder sets that you're making exclusively for your healers to use in this game mode. That sounds retarded to me, so I don't recommend it to anybody because they could just remove the token and now you've just evaporated 3 sets. Like you just made 3 sets and then evaporated them. They're gone.
For example, the Plunder Abuse team is one of the strongest in the game mode, and it uses 3 healers built with electro damage.
You can see
because one of the tokens in the game modes that is permanently accessible, called the Plunderer Captain Seal, deals big blasts of
they're exploding for like
electro damage after receiving enough healing ticks. Look at how
it's broken, right? It'll auto clear everything in WuWa, but it's also like, good lord, you've built 3 sets that work on one side on one of the stages every 2 weeks. Or sorry, every month, because WuWa resets every month.
Stupid this looks in the background. The worst part is that it's working a bit too well, like, come on.
Cheaper than pulling a character? Yeah, it is cheaper than pulling a character, but if you don't have any characters that can clear, and you somehow have this team, then I'm wondering what the fuck you pulled in the first place. Like, I'm genuinely wondering what you pulled on your account where you had to build this to clear. That's a greater question as well, right? I think this is being done by people who have an excess number of resources and they're just experimenting for fun. If you're doing this in lieu of building actual characters, because every single set you build to do this is a set you're not building for an actual DPS unit.
So the Plunder Abuse team and the Frolova team are in fact so far ahead of the competition that they're able to still hit resistant enemies to their element and they still perform. Yep. They're so strong that they just don't care and clear anyway when played and built properly.
I guess that's one advantage Frolova has. She will clear into Havoc resistant content, which doesn't make a lot of sense, right, when Frolova is a Havoc unit. She'll go into resistant content, which is something we talked about before. Cart can't really go into arrow resistance. Frolova, yeah, she doesn't care about it in Whimpering Waste. But Havoc resistance in TOA, yeah, it's going to be a problem for her.
Lastly, there's the Tower of Adversity, the last of the 3 endgame modes. This game mode will require much less explanation than the previous 2 because it's simply a combination of both. Characters have a limited amount of energy, requiring you to play multiple different teams. Varying temporary buffs that make the latest released teams much stronger are present. There are a lot of easy floors that culminate into the much more difficult Hazard Tower, named Middle Tower by the community. Characters want both AoE and single target on certain floors, like the 2nd and 3rd floors of the Middle Tower, while on some other floors, characters can get away with only single target capabilities, like the 1st and the 4th and final floor of the Middle Tower.
That's fair. Yeah, TOA has been pretty universally split as of like the last couple of resets. There's almost always an AoE floor where it's not really like massive amounts of AoE. It's usually between 2 or 3 mobs, which is like not a lot, right? But you still want to make sure that you're damaging both at the same time.
Here, multi-wave capabilities are not as important, so characters like Jinchi, who have a wide AoE but only concentrated in a couple key abilities, can perform totally fine on all floors, even though the poor girl, she sucks in Whimpering Waste. Additionally, characters like...
It's a Sentinel issue. And I wouldn't be surprised, guys, if Amiath releases and she's fucking dog shit in WuWa. It almost seems to be like a requirement for Sentinel Resonators to, like, not be that good in Whimpering Waste. Like, it seems to be consistent so far.
Thea, who are strong in Matrix for their raw damage output, are awesome, and characters like Frolova, who have a wide AoE while still retaining solid damage output, are also very strong as well. Hence, since bosses have a lower barrier to clear them, and multi-wave is not as emphasized, Tower Adversity requires both of the specializations of Matrix and Whimpering Waste, but also has less steep requirements, making it
you can usually group enemies well enough to not worry about AoE.
A balance of both extremes. Now that I've given a full overview of all endgame modes and illustrated what kind of teams would be effective in their contexts, let's talk about one of the most important elements affecting Wuthering Waves team building, the gacha. Wuthering Waves is a gacha game where, like I said earlier, not only are all teams not created equal, they also have varying costs.
Oh, and this is where we get into the value discussion, ladies and gentlemen. My question is, why this dude started explaining endgame modes backwards? The logic is not very hard to follow, right? Doubled Pawns is exclusively single target, WuWa's AoE, and TOA is both. And so you start off with the individual parts first, then get into the sum of the 2 parts. Which is like, I didn't think it was that difficult to follow, but I guess your mileage may vary depending on your education level.
While 99.9% of gamblers do quit right before they win big, chain systems require all of the characters on the team to be fully decked out and optimized for damage, since they're all contributing to a bigger total. Like, for example, If you take a 10% damage loss on 3% of your total damage, that's only 0.3% of your total damage being lost. But if you lose that 10% on your 40% of your total damage, that's a much more significant 4% being lost party-wide.
He should have explained that so let me use my Twitch chat to actually explain the math over there, because some people might not understand it. Imagine this happened, right? You're taking 10% of 40. That equals 4, right? Let's just say you got a 100% damage bonus though. Now you're getting 10% of 80. Now it's 8. So that 10% damage reduction, guys, doubled because of our damage bonus. So that's how reduction works.
That means chain systems will tend to be quite expensive on either your time or your wallet, or maybe even both. The more upgrades you miss out on with your entire team, the more you're penalized, where hypercarry teams can get away with less on 2 of the 3 party members, because it won't affect the total damage as much.
On hypercarry teams, you can invest all the resources into one unit and then have 2 homeless people on the side, and you're fine. If you play a team like Dual DPS or Mono Fusion, if one of your teammates is homeless, you're in trouble. You're in a massive amount of trouble if just one of those teammates doesn't have like good gear or lacks their signature or anything like that. So there are a lot of teams that are naturally way more affordable than others.
That's important because you can only gamble for so long until the funds run out after all. Like, the house always wins. In a game where all of the resources are scarce and time limited, and hence where you invest them
Not if you have money.
Counts a lot, teams
That's the important part. You don't have any constraints if you have money.
that are cheaper to get up and running to the standard of endgame modes are very favored. Similarly, for buffing and supporting characters, if they can slot into a wide variety of teams, that's a huge plus.
Remember what I said at the start? That 12 character requirement, but if you have Shorekeeper and Verena, it goes down to 10. And then if you have a sub DPS that can be used on multiple teams, it's 9. Then you have a second sub DPS that's used on multiple teams, now it's 8. The number just keeps like going down and down and down, right?
Since the more Yuno gets to cheat on her wife Augusta, the better off she is, because NTR is pretty cool. Sorry, I meant they'll serve.
Sorry, I need it. I need to play that back one more time. What was that?
Variety of teams, that's a huge plus. Since the more Yuno gets to cheat on her wife Augusta, the better off she is, because NTR is pretty cool. Sorry, I meant they'll serve.
Can I guys tell you something? I haven't played Yuno and Augusta together in like a couple of months, but I have been playing Yuno almost every day. So basically, like, I have been having so much more fun using Yuno with everybody other than like her best in slot partner, because the teams are just more fun. I'm sorry, bro. After using Augusta's Liberation for like the 3rd time, I got bored of it because it's actually kind of annoying. It's like I just have to press attack like 10 times, and like there's like not really anything to do. It's just I have to like just keep pressing it. And so like at a certain point it just gets like old, right? Because it's not like you're doing anything.
You not only for several teams with different specializations on your current roster, they'll also serve you for future teams that you pull and build. Lastly, since characters, their sequence nodes, and their weapons all cost gacha currency and require pulling on the gacha, the latter part being entirely luck dependent and the former part being entirely wallet and or time dependent, the less upgrades teams require to function in the endgame, the more value they hold.
So, if a character can skip their weapon and still provide a lot of their value, that makes them pretty good too.
Additionally, the more endgame modes they're very efficient in, the more value they're going to hold as well. Having the widest coverage for the lowest cost makes you the best. Now, let's talk about what
I think one thing that he doesn't talk about over here is the order that you should be pulling characters. Because my take is, you always start with the DPS first. Then you go for the sub DPSs afterwards. Because going for the DPSs first give you a sub DPS to shoot for. And then when you know the sub DPS to shoot for, then you can aim for another main DPS that sub DPS supports. And so, you might not have like a choice, right, for who you want. But let's just say you wanted Galbraina. You wanted Galbraina, so you pull Chuyan. And so now that you have Chuyan, you pull Frolova too, because that's really high value. And that should be how like your pulling decisions go, right? For example, oh, you pull Augusta. Great. Now you pull Yuno. Oh, who works with Yuno? Oh, Chakota. Or, oh, Lene. Now I pulled Augusta, Yuno, and then Lene, and now I have 2 DPS teams. One with her and one with her. And that just makes a lot more sense than pulling fucking Chisa. Because then, now I need Cartithia. Okay, great. Now Cartithia needs Chacona. Okay, great. But I just pulled 3 characters and now I only have 1 team when I could have pulled 3 characters and now I have 2 teams. Isn't that crazy how that works? You pulled 3 characters and got 1 team by going for Chisa first, but then you go for anybody else and now you have 2 teams.
I personally think of everything I just covered, and finally, I'll be giving you guys the promised endgame tier list you were waiting for.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
So in Wuthering Waves, what determines the meta to most will be return on investment. In a game where resources are scarce and top performance isn't strictly required, getting the best bang for your buck is essentially what most players should be aiming towards in order to clear the endgame content quickly
Fair.
and smoothly at minimal expenses. As a matter of fact, the game is fully free-to-play accessible, provided your free gacha currency is properly spent for casuals, or provided you play well enough for players willing to optimize their gameplay to the fullest.
I think that's also the main thing that people gotta recognize as well when it comes to WuWa. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to clear if your account has reached a certain level of investment or age. Because you don't actually need a lot in this game, and there aren't really that many struggles from actual free-to-play players. There are definitely struggles if you're using older units, but the older units can still get it done, but that's really where it is. If you're somebody that has been, regularly getting gacha currency and stuff like that, regularly getting, new units, investing in your echoes and stuff like that, there shouldn't be a reason that you, can't clear unless you're just, absolutely missing something, right? Like, you're missing the SIGs on a Cartithia Chacona team. Like, Cartithia, Chacona, and Chisa, all 3 of them don't have signatures. Then you're probably going to have an issue. But if you also choose just the wrong units as well to prioritize, that's where you're going to get fucked. Imagine if you pulled a Rosia. For God forbid, imagine if you're one of those weirdos that pulled 7 Rosias. Imagine if you did that. Pulled Yinlin. Pulled Chisa. Pulling Chang Li in 2026. Guys, this unit is so bad. Like, this unit, in about 10 hours, might be one of the worst ones in the game. I'm just telling you, in about 10 hours, Chang Li is probably going to be one of the worst units in the game. I don't even mean that slightly sarcastically. I mean that entirely seriously. Because you want to know who is going to be on Mono Fusion after this? It's going to be Brant and Galbrena. It's going to be Mornier, Lupa, Brant, and Galbrena. And Chang Li is going to sit in the cuck chair. I hope you recognize that. That is what's going to happen. So yeah, there are a lot of bad picks. But fortunately, there's only a few bad picks. But the picks that are bad, they're really bad. And by really bad, I mean like this and like this levels of bad. Because this unit being in tier 0.5, I'm just gonna be honest, guys. Like, bro, I don't even think it's real anymore. I don't even think this is real anymore.
Even bottom tiers can clear content if played well enough. To draw a comparison from earlier, it's the same way a bottom tier Smash Bros. Brawl character played by a pro can win against a Meta Knight played by a casual player in a tournament setting. Even though one of them is centralizing the meta, skill is compensating for that factor. Hence, a meta gets carved out where effective value is determined by the widest variety of team usage, full hybrid buffers and supports, and raw damage output in all endgame scenarios for DPS. This is because the more buffers and supports are universally applicable, the more they alleviate the pressure of players having to spend for future dedicated partners for the DPS they want to utilize, while
I would say the generalist argument works until you end up with a best-in-slot team for that generalist character. Think about it this way. A lot of people talk about, Linnea's got general outro amping, and so she can buff almost every character in the game. But Linnea's going to have a best-in-slot DPS. It could be Amiath. It could be Luke. Who knows who it is, right? She's going to have a best-in-slot DPS that she's going to want to be with the entire time. And so, if she's, locked into a team because that's her best-in-slot, what's kind of the point of their generalist ability anyways? Because you kind of already don't have their flexibility anymore if they're essential to making another unit work. Have you thought about that? It could be that Linnea does not need Amiath, but Amiath really needs Linnea. And so, is there a point in her being flexible at all anymore if she's locked into Amiath's team at the end of the day? That's something to think about as well, just in terms of this unit's supposed to work with a lot of people, but that would mean you have to actually play those other teams.
the DPS themselves are doing the heavy.
Remember, otherwise it's just potential man. Otherwise, she's just potential woman. There's no use at all in this benefit if you don't ever actually use it.
lifting. Now, what do I personally make of that? Well, I personally think that without mentioning which ones, given the circumstances of a large number of gacha games on the market having a lot of pay-to-win elements and mechanics that strongly encourage spending for performance, Kuro Games managed to create a good balance between rewarding spenders for their support of the game and free-to-play players for their time spent playing it. Wuthering Waves doesn't feel like there's an imbalance between insurmountable obstacles for free-to-play players highly encouraging spending, or making spending feel useless because the game is too free-to-play friendly.
Spending definitely feels useful. Spending definitely doesn't feel necessary, but spending definitely does feel like a nice to have.
Kuro did a great job at balancing in that regard. While some character kits definitely aren't perfect, looking at negative status characters saying that,
I'm just gonna be real with you over here. Zani and Phoebe, in my opinion, are the worst designed units in the game.
and the launch period of the game was undeniably a pretty wacky experience, Kuro has kept on improving both from a meta standpoint and simply from a general standpoint on how fun the game is. The story has gotten significantly better, especially recently with version 3.0. We just got animations for Amy publicized as I'm writing this, and honestly, the way Kuro keeps outdoing themselves is just impressive to me.
My hope for Amiath has been this. And guys, you might be saying, oh, Saint has looked at leaks or like whatever. I have a timestamp from a video on her debut when she got drip marketed before, like a month before the fucking beta even went live. I said, I hope she's the first character, the first Sentinel, that has a variety of ways to damage the units. And you want to know what I said? I hope she's got, like, a Toon team. I hope she's got a Raw Fusion team with Lupa. And I hope she's got a Fusion Burst team. And maybe that's what's going to occur, guys. Maybe Amiath is going to be the first time we have a unit that can actually be built in multiple ways. And if that is the case, brother, I'm going to be so happy for it. I just hope that can actually occur, and she's not going to be like the other Sentinels, where they're hard locked into one team with one mechanic and nothing else.
I do have my gripes with the meta. As I mentioned, I think the negative status archetype wasn't done well at all due to forcing the acquisition and usage of dedicated supports for every negative status you pull. Like, Zani should...
And guys, this is the thing. If it actually turns out to be that way, then that just means that I'm spitting, bro. Yeah, that just means I hold the cards, bro.
Not need Phoebe for her to serve the basic purpose of functioning properly, bro. What is this? And as a result, some team archetypes are definitely handled better than others. Additionally, the meta being scaled off of owning the signature weapons of every character makes certain units like Chisa and Roshia really redundant and unnecessary to own, since characters with a much lower cost, in both cases being completely free, can perform their roles just as well.
That's also the other thing, guys. Wuthering Waves has to be a free-to-play friendly game because they release limited units that are so fucking bad. Like, think about a character as bad as Chisa being released in Genshin right now. Guys, Genshin has had bad units, right? Genshin has had a bunch of bad units. Have they had a bad unit since, like, 5.3? Has Genshin had, like, a low-value, not strong unit since, like, 5.3? No, they've all been fucking ass to the fucking wall broken, right? Same with HSR, they've all been broken. Like, everyone's just been broken in every game. And then we got Chisa over here, where the #1 recommendation is, don't pull her. Rosia, Yinlin, the #1 recommendations are, don't pull them. They're a waste of pulls. They will brick your account. That's the advice. That's free-to-play friendly, man.
Finally, some of the endgame content, and by far the most guilty of this is Wuthering Waves, leans way too hard into abusing temporary buffs for the current and recent on-banner characters, which really pushes frequent spending in that game mode if players didn't pull for the top meta units already. So overall, while Wuthering Waves' meta isn't perfectly fair to every character, which that's bound to be the case, it definitely has a lot going for it in terms of balancing, and...
Let me think about it this way. In the Wuthering Waves meta right now, there are some units where it feels really bad for them to be bad, but there are other units where if they're bad, you don't really care that much. I don't think too many people care if, like, Bu Ling isn't that great. I don't think too many people care that Chisa doesn't have that many teams because, like, I'm just gonna be real, I don't think a lot of people pulled her. However, for main DPS units, right, that's where the conversation shifts. Guys, me simply stating that this character has troubles clearing got me, like, basically, not the equivalent of threats, but, like, people said they, like, hated me a lot because I said this character struggled in floor 4 of the TOA. That's what I said. I said she had struggles because she, like, does, and, like, all they did was prove. They sent me, like, 400 videos of clears, all proving that she struggles. That's kind of like the thing, guys. is that when the DPS units are the ones that feel like they're falling behind, that's when people start freaking out. But kind of like everything to the right of this, nobody cares.
Acquiring the units needed to handle all sorts of situations is only a matter of time investment for free-to-play players for up to a few months of
Does Carlotta clear? Always.
progress, if that's what they're targeting the most.
And guys, you can also think about it this way. In terms of age relative to the game, did you know that Carlotta is only 42 days older than Camellia? And so forever in the conversation of talking about Camelia's ability to clear, guys, do recognize Carlotta's only 42 days after Camellia in terms of release time. Or, yeah, sorry, 42 days younger than Camellia. Like, that is how old Carlotta is.
Spending only speeds up and facilitates that process rather than it
She's basically a 1.x unit at this point.
being necessary. Now finally, for those who are awaiting the tier list, I'll start with the top tier characters and go down. Let's get into this.
Okay.
So each character is assumed to be played in their best role. This looks at overall value as per the criteria I detailed in like this entire video. So it should be pretty self-explanatory. Remember, characters in the same tier are not ordered. This is important. So characters in the same tier are all possessing the same value that is specified by the tier name.
Where is it? Where is it? Come on.
No character in the same tier being stronger than...
I don't care.
So in GOAT status, we're gonna have Frolova, Shorekeeper, and Verena.
If we're going with Frolova's ability to just fuck Whimpering Waste regardless of anything, sure. She literally...
These characters are so valuable.
And she's good. She's strong enough to clear any TOA she's in as well. Sure.
I cannot argue for a
And double pawns too. Sure.
reason not to get them. Frolova is the one and only queen of Whimpering Wastes and has the raw damage output of a monster, which is plenty for Tower and Matrix. Her only caveat is you really want either her signature or one premium teammate, and she can work with only one of the two, so either a weapon or the teammates, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
She can even work as a heavy attack buffer, and she can play as a huge crowd control and damage focused sub DPS instead. She's the only DPS I would glaze this hard. Actually, it's not even glaze, it's just facts. Shorekeeper and Verena probably don't need much explaining though. Like, they're the two.
This is the thing. I'll skip the ones that, like, are obvious, because it's like, Shorekeeper and Verena, I've already explained why. Their general use case supports, their outro skills ramp, blah, blah, blah. We can move on. I've already talked about this, and we all know they're at the top for a reason.
Just energy regen and, like, level 50, and that's it. Then,
like, feel free to watch the video explanation for some of the obvious ones. I don't think it's necessary here, and we're, like, already over an hour.
we got the highly valuable characters, almost ghost status, but not quite. Augusta is one who wants her signature weapon, and other than that, you got the full team in Mortefi and Verena Shorekeeper. It can be improved further with Yuno, and it works everywhere.
Fair. Yeah, no, I like it.
Speaking of Yuno, she can function as both a DPS and a buffer and get top tier performance, which is huge. Now, she needs either her signature weapon as a DPS or premium teammates to work as a buffer, but that's only really a big deal in Tower or Matrix as a DPS, though.
I personally would not put Mono Fusion in the top couple of rankings for one reason. It's because everybody on the Mono Fusion team needs to be built. Using Augusta as an example, right? Augusta needs to be built, but she needs to be the only person on the team that's built to make her team work. And she's the only one that needs her sig. In Mono Fusion, for example, there are some units that really want their sig, even if they're not the DPS in that team. I think Mono Fusion's just too expensive in terms of, like, limited units required, and there's not a lot of, like, great free-to-play options. Maybe after Mornier releases, I could agree with this, but I think it's just too premium.
We then have...
Because, like, you don't even have, like, the Shorekeeper or Verena that you can slot in, like you can with the Augusta or the Yuno teams, or the Linnae teams, right? Or even the Mortefi that's up here, right? Lupa's the only one that kind of, like, feels like they would need two non-general teammates.
Lupa, Linnae, and Mortefi. None of them...
So by that alone, I think that she should be bumped down.
really care about having their signature weapon, except maybe Lupa a little bit.
But everyone else I can agree with.
Even still, not a huge loss. They all work insanely well for the archetype they specialize in. Linnae specializes in almost nothing. She's just a general buffer with slightly higher buffs to liberate.
It's not slightly higher. It's like a whole 25. It's like a whole fucking 35, like 35% amp, bro. Like 25% amp. That's like, that's not nothing.
Damage, but like, who cares? Like, she just gets better in liberation teams than she
It's 25% amp.
Already is, and she's already more than good enough. Now, Lupa carries an entire element being fusion, and Mortefi is super good for all heavy attack damage dealers, which we have a lot of right now, and most importantly, the guy is free, he's a 4-star.
So, think about it this way. If you have a unit like Brant or Mornier, Lupa suddenly goes into GOAT status. But the thing is, it's required that you have one of like her core essential teammates, which is a fusion sustain unit. And if you pull Lupa, you have to pull a fusion sustain unit for you to actually get value out of her.
Now we have the really good characters, so those usually have one major flaw. That's kind of it, really.
This is my take. Chakota should go up, Lupa should go down.
Other than that, they're just pretty good. Caldithea, Shakona, and Arrow Rover all work together, and they...
Chakota should go up, because Chakona doesn't need 3 Arrow teammates, which is kind of like her main thing. She doesn't need 2 Arrow teammates, and she's on the best Arrow teams in the game.
Are the best tower adversity.
And she works with... Like, you get what I mean, right?
Team in the game with an asterisk. You'll see later.
Yeah. These two just need to be swapped, and I think this is fine.
Arrow Rover is an arrow support who has their signature weapon completely given out for free. Their sequences...
Arrow Rover shouldn't even be on here because they're fucking free.
As well, and they don't need big investment. They have an amazing synergy with Shakona in all arrow teams, who, by the way, does not...
Like, does it matter? You get them for free.
Need her signature to work, and Arrow is pretty meta right now, to say the least. That includes Caldithea, who wants her signature, really likes having Shakona too, but you get huge return on investment in the form of having the best tower and matrix DPS in the game. Galbrenna is also here because she doesn't need her signature, and she has a good free-to-play teammate in Mortefi, while working pretty well across all game modes, except maybe not being as strong in Whimpering, similarly to Caldithea. However, she's much less strong with Mortefi than Augusta, and ideally, when it comes to Galbrenna, you want a premium teammate.
Galbrenna Mortefi, in my opinion, is just such a dog shit team because you're just constantly asking why you're not using Augusta instead. That's why I don't ever recommend, if you have only Mortefi, to pull Galbrenna. Galbrenna is kind of like one of those deals where you want either Mono Fusion or Chuyan for her. And if you don't have that, she's not worth pulling. You need Chuyan or Mono Fusion for her. Otherwise, if you're using her with Mortefi, why the fuck aren't you just using Augusta?
Then we have the good value in best team characters, and those are explained by their tiers.
Chang Li should, like, not be here. I'm still of the mindset of, how the fuck is Chang Li on here? Because, like, even now, Chang Li is the worst member of Mono Fusion. You replace Chang Li in the current Mono Fusion, you run Lupa, Brant, Galbrenna. Chang Li has actually gotten replaced already in Mono Fusion. It's gone. So, like, that's a little bit rough. So I think Chang Li should easily be in the niche tier.
I'll detail the best teams so you have them. Chang Li and Brand go with Lupa, Choyuan.
I think that sub DPS wise, Chuyan should probably be in really good because he works with 2 tier 0 DPSs. From that perspective, he supports 2 tier 0 DPSs on their best teams. Yeah, I think he should be going just based off of that alone. And this is also the other thing. Chuyan with his Sig is also a viable main DPS. If you have Chakota and Yudo too. So that's like, he has actually 3 viable teams in the game right now to clear endgame. I think that's enough for really good at least.
And Cantarella go with Filova, Zani, Phoebe.
Doesn't that apply for Brant too? I think after Mornier releases, Brant goes up.
And Spectre Over go together, Colada and Jaja go together, and
Cantarella, though, I can see Cantarella going down, though, because Cantarella is a bit like Chuyan, but Cantarella only has 1 team.
Finally, Encore
It's with Filova. Like I said before, Chuyan has 3.
is the only real outlier here, but that's because she isn't the strongest permanently accessible DPS team in the game, and she really puts in work for beginners with Sanhua, while also gaining massive stonks with Lupa if you want to invest in her further. Only issue is, Encore sucks in Whimpering, but at least she's permanently accessible and she's good at that.
I will say, Encore being on here is definitely a decision. This is what I would say. Bump Chang Li, Encore, and Lupa down. The thing is, I think Sweat just really likes the Mono Fusion team, and so he, like, rates it very highly. He also really likes Mornier because it supports Mono Fusion. I think he's just bumping up, like, these redheads up here, like, up 1 tier when they probably shouldn't. That's just my take. Again, it's not a big deal. I just think he really likes Mono Fusion. It's reflecting here.
Now, we start entering the tier where characters are too niche for me to deem worthwhile in most scenarios, but if you want their niche use, you might want to get them. Chisa is the best first slot for Caldithea and Chakona theoretically, but she needs...
This is my take. Gian goes up several tiers if you have either Yuno or Chakona. Without a doubt, he goes up several tiers. Because that's a team that clears Whimpering Waste and it clears TOA at very high levels. If a team's able to do both of those, then it's really good value in the best team. And so that's why I would move it up if you have those teammates. But the fact of the matter is that Chuyan is also able to do that Not as well as Jian, but Xion is basically able to fill in that arrow DPS role as well in that same team. So it's kind of like you can be slightly worse than Jian, but also be able to support these other units at the same time, which is kind of like the difference between the two.
Either significant investment via her signature and echoes, or significant optimization with strong echoes too, so it's kind of hard to suggest her over Arrow over, but theoretically she's better. It's kind of a hard
Guys, just wait until you see the other characters.
Position to be in. And then Jian, he can be good with Yuno and or Chikona across all game modes.
There you go.
But he's stealing from much stronger damage dealers who partner with them, like Augusta and Cardathea, or just...
Well, think about it this way, brother. If I'm stealing Chikona away from Cardathea for WuWa, that's good. You like that. It's good. That's good that happened. Because Cart can sometimes suck big ass in Whimpering Waste, but Chikona Jian, that combo fucks Whimpering Waste completely.
Yuno as a DPS on her own.
And you can't play Yuno as a DPS on her own in Whimpering Waste.
3 options, Havoc Rover is...
So Jian is now the perfect unit to make up for the fact that your other arrow units are getting fucked in Whimpering Waste.
A free-to-play DPS for everything, but Whimpering if you're in a pinch. Dungeon is very good for Folova as a free-to-play option, but she...
Which, when you think about it, that's kind of cool.
Gets outclassed by premium choices. And finally, Brawling and Yohu are part of Plunderer abuse in Whimpering if you want to invest in that to obliterate the modes, but they're restricted to it. Brawling can, however, work as a free-to-play support, particularly for skill damage healers, but she's also...
Guys, just wait until the 1.x units get their kit buffs, okay? They're surely going to happen at some point because you realize that... I hope you guys realize Jian is the highest ranked 1.x DPS on here, right?
So generally outclassed by Verena, who's just completely free. And finally, the characters in our last tier are just not worth their cost, whether it comes to return on investment.
So literally, Jian is the best 1.x DPS. That is a fact. He has the strongest teams right now. Every other 1.x DPS has lower damage than he does. Zhang Liao with Linne is better. I actually don't think it is. I feel like Zhang Liao with Linne actually reaches the level of Mortifi Jian.
Or their cost of attention compared to...
I think Zhang Liao Linne just barely reaches Mortifi Jian level.
To above characters, I would only advise you to pick one of them up if they happen to be your favorite character in the game. Otherwise, I would tell you to skip them because they're either power crept, don't have a best team to be played in, or have too high costs to justify pulling them over any of the above options.
Think about it this way. There's no reason to pull Camellia if you could just get Frolova, right? This is basically saying if everybody was on banner right now, this is what you should be pulling. And frankly, it's not inaccurate. It's pretty accurate. Like, think about it from the perspective, a banner with every single unit in the game is up right now. This is who you should or should not be pulling. And honestly, it's like, yeah, if you had everybody available at once, you probably shouldn't be getting any of these guys. But if we're going to be real, you shouldn't be getting any Spectro DPSs. Look, this is the main takeaway from this. Spectro is dead, and this is why Luke Herson being another Spectro DPS is not bad. Look how dead Spectro is. You got her, and her, and her. Like, I feel like Luke is just gonna be the best feeling unit because all these other ones feel kind of shit. They all have some clunk in their kit. Jinxi's air dodge counters, you actually have to get hit while playing this unit. Bro, if you dodge with this unit, it's like the biggest DPS loss on the planet. Because you sit there, right? Summon up that dragon. The animation takes like 10 seconds. You don't want to use her dodge counters. Then this character is just the clunkiest shit in the game. And this character's like clunk too. Bro, every Spectro character feels like shit other than Shorekeeper and Verena. So yeah, I'm ready for Luke, brother.
Compared to what you're getting in exchange for that.
Is Phoebe rated for Absolution or Confession? Honestly, I feel like Phoebe should be in niche. I could go with these two jumping down here. I'm not even. I could go for these two jumping down here.
Cost. Oh, and just kidding, I totally forgot Sanhua and Mornier, whose values are entirely speculative.
Why Sanhua? Oh, based off of Luke. Yeah, Sanhua's based off of where she works with Luke. However, Lupa should also be in speculative. So should Shang Li, Encore, and Brant. If we're gonna be real here, because when Mornier releases, I think Brant goes up, Chang Li goes down, Encore maybe stays the same. Because when Mornier releases, guys, Chang Li is now homeless. I think I already said this before, but she is not going to be played ever again.
Now, Monia is not released yet, as I'm making this video, and Sanhua is awaiting a potential basic attack DPS in the form of Luke in the next patch, so in the coming months. Though this isn't...
Because you want to know who deals the least damage on the Mono Fusion team? If you were to have Lupa, Brant, and Chang Li together, Lupa deals the least damage, but she has the best buffs. Brant deals the most damage and heals. Chang Li only does damage and doesn't do the most on the team, and has the shortest outro skill. Yeah, you replace Chang Li and you put Mornier in. That's how the team works.
Confirmed, with the limited information I have to work with, I expect Sanhua to be in the really good tier with Luke as a main DPS, while Mornier ends up in either GOAT status or highly valuable, since she's almost definitely generalist support like Shorekeeper and Verena. Sanhua herself is a very cheap, almost costless basic attack buffer, who I would currently place in the niche tier if I had to. However, we haven't got a basic attack main DPS since over a year ago with Camellia, way back in 1.4, we're now...
That's actually true.
Now in 3.0, by the way, so
Cartithia sorta counts as one, but not really.
her value just isn't good right now. Placing her in the niche tier wouldn't do her justice with an upcoming DPS for her to pair with on the horizon though.
I mean, this is also the thing, man. She's fucking free, so it doesn't matter, right? It's not like anyone's gonna be like, oh, well, after watching this video, I'm just gonna make the conscious decision not to pull Sanhua. No, bitch, she's a 4-star. It doesn't fucking matter. You like, even if you don't want her, you get her.
Now, as the last thing in this video, I'll be featuring a small rant where I'm just explaining what my future plans are for the channel, so where everything's headed. If you don't care about that...
Overall, I would say, I understand the perspective that he's coming from with this tier list. Obviously, I have like a slight disagreement on about the placement of like 3 characters, but it's not that big of a deal because the arguments that he's making make sense. And I just want you to have this framing about this video and this conversation. Imagine all the points, all the advice, all the info being talked about. It's within the context of you have the ability to spend pulls on any unit in the game. And if you had that ability, it's the anniversary banners again. Who should you pull and who should you skip? And if that's the take, I'm going to be real over here. Other than a couple of units moving up or down, this is pretty good overall advice. Because I'm always telling people, don't skip the sun and moon. Hey, don't skip the sun and moon. I've been saying that since the dawn of time. Chacona's really good. Galbraina's all right, but not as good as Augusta, right? Very, very similar sort of lines to what I've been saying before. But of course, right? A little bit of bias is going to show, and you see that with the monofusion stuff. But overall, great video, great points, and I would say very helpful as an introduction for players. However, I would say the video is a little bit long, and it would be actually, I think, better divided up into one for beginners and one for veterans, because it's kind of like we try to do a little bit of both, but you kind of just want to appeal to like one side of the crowd versus others, versus just making like a long video where like half of it is irrelevant for half the crowd, and the and vice versa. So yeah, that'll be it for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Awesome job by Sweat. Let me know what you all thought. Peace out.